Dust curled around the boots of 20 men. They stood still in the heat of Elkhorn County, eyes fixed on the sheriff. The town square was quiet, too quiet for a Monday. A single bird cried overhead, then flew off, as if it knew to leave. The sheriff stood tall on the church steps. His voice was rough. "There's a ranch west of the basin, runs dry, the roof's gone, fence rotted, it's free, for any man desperate enough to take it." A few chuckled. Most stayed silent. Daniel Coyle stepped forward. Daniel, a thin man with cracked boots and a stitched coat, didn't look at the others. He looked at the sheriff. Daniel Coyle had lost his cattle, lost his wife, and now owed more than he owned. But he still had his name. Daniel Coyle didn't speak. The sheriff stared at Daniel. "You sure?" Daniel nodded once. A tall man near the well whispered, "That place eats people." A woman hissed back, "Hush now." The sheriff stepped down. He didn't hand over a deed. No paper, no stamp. Just a rusted iron key. The key scraped in Daniel's palm. It felt cold. Too cold. The sheriff's hand lingered. "Just don't dig where the ground whistles." Nobody laughed. Daniel looked at the crowd. No one met his eyes, not even the preacher. Daniel, the rancher, walked to his mule, climbed up, and rode west. The road to the ranch was bone dry, wind carving long lines in the dirt. Behind him, someone crossed themselves. The sun leaned toward the hills. Shadows stretched across Daniel's path. The land was sharp, empty. The fence he passed was more splinter than wood. Daniel rode on. That ranch had a name once. No one said it anymore. As Daniel neared the edge of the basin, he didn't look back. The wind changed direction. The key in Daniel's hand whistled once through the hole in its head. "Just don't dig where the ground whistles." The sky turned gray as Daniel Coyle reached the ranch. The land around him was cracked and dry. Grass was brittle, no birds, no sounds, only wind scraping dust across the hard ground. Daniel, the rancher, looked up at the barn. The roof sagged. One door hung loose. Nailed near the top was a bent, rusted horseshoe. It faced down, bad luck, some would say. Daniel tied his mule to a broken post. The wood flaked in his hand. He opened the barn door. It groaned loud, like something old waking. Up. Inside, the air smelled of dust, mold, and time. Daniel spent hours fixing what he could. He boarded windows. He cleared hay. He nailed a loose shutter. Sweat soaked his shirt, but Daniel didn't stop. He needed this place to work. That night, the fire burned low in the fireplace. Daniel lay on the wooden floor, wrapped in a thin blanket. The wind outside had died. The land was still. Then came the sound, a soft, slow whistling, one note. Then a pause, then again. Daniel sat up. He held his breath. The sound was not wind. The whistle came steady, like someone breathing through tight lips. Daniel, the rancher, grabbed his rifle. He moved slow, quiet. He opened the door. No breeze, no trees, no movement, just silence. Daniel stepped into the yard. The moon lit the barn in pale blue. He walked toward the stable. The whistling stopped. Daniel opened the stable door. His boots crunched on old straw. He aimed the rifle with one hand. With the other, he moved hay aside. More straw. Then something hard. Daniel knelt. His fingers brushed leather. It was a pouch, small, black, and old. The flap held 2 faded letters. T.H. Daniel opened it. Inside, a gold coin, smooth and heavy. Next to it, a photo, half-burned, edges blackened. It showed 2 men in coats. Behind them stood a minecart. They were smiling. Daniel read the words scratched below the photo. "Before the betrayal." A chill hit his spine. Daniel held the pouch tight. He heard it again, just once, the soft whistle, but this time it came from inside the stable. Daniel, the rancher, should have stayed inside. The morning sun was sharp. Heat shimmered off the ground. Daniel Coyle stepped outside with his rifle slung low. He checked the fence near the north post. Boards were split. Tracks from the night before had vanished. Daniel, the rancher, knelt by the edge of the gate. That's when he heard it. Daniel Coyle. The voice came slow, dry, like wind through gravel. Daniel stood fast. A man sat still on a black horse just beyond the fence. The man wore a wide black hat pulled low. His hands were red and twisted, burned deep. Daniel raised the rifle. "Who are you?" The stranger smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "That ranch killed my brother." Daniel, the rancher, didn't lower the rifle. The stranger held something in his hand, a small square of folded paper. He tossed it over. The fence. It landed near Daniel's boots. The stranger's eyes stayed on Daniel. "Don't trust the ground here. Don't trust what's buried." Daniel stepped forward. "What do you want?" The man turned the horse. "I already told you." Then the stranger kicked once. The horse moved fast, too fast. Daniel ran to the fence. Dust rose in the air. Daniel, the rancher, grabbed the paper and climbed the top rail. He scanned the trail. Empty. The man was gone. No figure on the horizon. No sound of hooves. No cloud of dirt. Daniel jumped down. He followed the trail on foot. Dry shrubs cracked under his steps. He found hoof prints. Clear at first, deep into the path. Then nothing, just hard dirt. No tracks, no turns. Gone. Daniel opened the folded note. 4 words written in bold black ink, Trinity Shaft under the chapel. Then a line below, smaller, like a whisper on paper. Blood bought. Daniel closed his hand around the note. Proof. Token. 2. Daniel, the rancher, looked out at the land. He turned toward the east fence, toward the trees. Where was the chapel? Why? Did the stranger know his name? Daniel glanced down the trail once more. No man rides without tracks. The sky turned dark fast. Clouds rolled in thick. Lightning flashed behind the hills. The wind picked up, sharp and sudden. Daniel Coyle looked to the barn. Daniel, the rancher, moved quick. Rain started to fall in heavy drops. He pulled the barn door shut and dropped the latch. The wood groaned. Inside, shadows danced. The storm cracked loud above. Daniel grabbed loose boards and nailed them across the windows. He moved from wall to wall, sealing every gap he could. Then one sound stopped him. A slow creak above. Daniel looked up toward the loft. He climbed the ladder. Each step creaked. Hay dust floated in the... Here in the far corner, one floorboard sat crooked. Daniel, the rancher, stepped over. He knelt and pulled gently. The board lifted easy. Underneath, a long, flat envelope lay hidden in a hollow. The paper inside felt old, brittle. Daniel unrolled it across a workbench. It was a map, detailed, precise. The outline matched the ranch. But one area near the tree line was marked with a red X. Next to it, 2 words, Trinity Shaft. In the bottom corner were the same 2 letters as on the pouch. TH. Daniel traced the map with his finger. A cold breeze rushed through the barn. Then glass shattered. One of the boarded windows blew open. Wind roared inside. The lantern tipped. Flames licked the edge of the map. Daniel grabbed it fast, but fire took most of the sheet. He slapped the flames down with his coat. When the smoke cleared, only a blackened corner remained. The red X was gone. Daniel stood in silence, breathing hard. He looked at what was left. Just the words, Trinity Shaft. TH proof token, the 3, then, outside. A whistle, faint, like breath through cracked teeth. Daniel stepped to the barn door. The fire didn't want to die alone. Branches clawed at Daniel Coyle's coat as he pushed through. Thick brush. The trees here were older. Their limbs hung low, moss-covered and still. No birds sang. No wind moved the leaves. Daniel, the rancher, held the burned corner of the map. Only part remained, but it was enough to guide him east. Past the basin. Toward the tree line. The brush opened without warning. There it stood, a small chapel, broken, choked in ivy and shadow. Stone walls slumped, but still stood. The roof was mostly gone. Sunlight pierced through jagged holes. Daniel stepped forward. The chapel door was missing. Just a frame now, leaning crooked. Inside it was cold, colder than the outside air. The floor was stone, cracked with age. Daniel stepped carefully. He saw markings. Dozens of carved crosses covered the walls and ground. Some were neat, some rushed. Bullet holes pitted the far wall. Black scorch marks smeared the stone. Daniel, the rancher, walked toward the altar. It was a block of wood and stone, half sunk into the floor. He circled it once. A faint seam ran under. The base. Daniel pulled. It didn't move. He braced his shoulder and heaved harder. Wood groaned. Then shifted. A square trapdoor creaked open. The smell of dust and rust rose up. Daniel took his lantern and lowered it into the dark. Steps curved down. Not dirt, stone steps, carved and old. As the lantern dropped lower, it caught on something. Shimmer metal, lots of it, gleaming under the light. Then, a voice. Right behind him, a whisper, low and dry. He's found it. Daniel spun, rifle up. No one. Empty doorframe. No shadow. No sound. Just his breath and the trees outside. Daniel, the rancher, stepped back from the trapdoor. Not all whispers come from wind. Daniel Coyle lit a second lantern and tied it to his belt. The air below the chapel trapdoor felt colder now. Heavy. The kind of cold that doesn't come from wind. Just silence and the weight of years. Daniel, the rancher, stepped down the stone stairs. Each footfall echoed, slow and sharp. The light barely reached the bottom, but enough to see shapes. Wood beams held the walls. Some had split, but most stood strong. Rusted rails ran along the floor. A broken minecart leaned sideways, its wheels sunk into dirt. Daniel walked deeper. Crates lined the far wall. Old wood, thick dust, nails black with age. He lifted the lid off one crate. Gold. Bars stacked in rows, dull from time, but still gold. One bar near the top caught the light, etched across the side. Confed Reserve. Daniel touched it. Cold. Solid. Real. This wasn't just money. It was history. Buried, hidden, meant to be forgotten. Daniel, the rancher, turned back to the stairs. That's when he saw it. Torchlight at the top, 3 shadows, then boots, voices, and... One man stepped forward, slow and smiling. The sheriff, he wasn't in uniform, he wore black, and in his hand Daniel's own rifle. Well, the sheriff said, looks like we were right. Daniel didn't speak. The sheriff stepped down one stair. We knew someone would be dumb enough to look. Another man behind him chuckled. The third said nothing, just held a coil of rope. Daniel, the rancher, backed toward the crates. You hid it here, Daniel said. No, the sheriff replied. We did. Long before your time. But now it's ours again. Daniel reached into his coat. Quiet, one step closer and they'd see his hand, but the sheriff paused. What's that in your pocket? Daniel held his breath. His fingers closed around the gold coin from the leather pouch. Proof token number 1. The man with the rope moved fast, stepping off the stair. Daniel threw the coin. It hit the lantern behind them. Glass shattered. Flame burst. Up in that flash, Daniel ran for the side. Gunfire cracked. Sparks flew from stone. Daniel dove behind a support beam. One crate shattered under fire. The minecart rolled, hit the rail, and slammed into a post. Beams creaked. Daniel fired once. The man with the rope screamed, fell. The sheriff cursed and ducked low. Smoke filled the shaft. Daniel heard footsteps running. Then silence. He stood up slow, coughing, bleeding from a cut above his brow. The sheriff was gone. So was the gold, hidden again in smoke and dust. Daniel... The rancher leaned on the crate. Not all thieves wear masks. The shaft creaked overhead. Dust fell from the beams like slow rain. Daniel Coyle crouched behind a crate, heart pounding, rifle heavy in his hands. Daniel, the rancher, looked down. In his coat pocket was the old leather pouch, the one marked TH. The gold coin was gone, but the half-burned photo still rested inside. Footsteps moved through the smoke. One man was close, too close. Daniel took a breath. He stood, stepped out fast, and shouted, "Hey!" 3 heads turned toward him. Daniel threw the pouch into the open lantern. Flames exploded. Fire rolled up the side wall. In the flash, Daniel charged. He tackled the nearest man, one of the hired guns, shoulder to chest. Both crashed to the floor. The man grunted, rolled to grab his pistol. Too late. Daniel slammed his fist once, twice. Another gunman fired. Wood split. Sparks flew. A support beam cracked. The sheriff shouted, "Take him down!" Daniel, the rancher, dove behind a broken mine. "Cut!" He grabbed the fallen pistol from the first man's belt. Gunshots filled the shaft. The fire spread along the crates. Smoke curled thick, choking the air. Daniel fired once, missed, then again. The second man screamed and dropped his rifle. A bullet tore into Daniel's side. He fell to one knee, gasping. The sheriff moved forward through the fire, face lit red. "You should have stayed broke," the sheriff said. Daniel lifted his hand, slow and shaking. He fired. The bullet hit center chest. The sheriff staggered, mouth open, one step back. Then fell. The last man turned and ran. Boots pounded the stone steps, gone. Silence took the shaft, only fire and breath. Daniel leaned against the crate, bleeding but alive. Smoke curled through the beams. The photo pouch burned in the lantern flame. Proof token *1, now ash. Daniel, the E. Rancher dropped the empty pistol. Smoke clears. One man doesn't get up. Smoke still drifted across the shaft as Daniel Coyle pressed his hand to his side. The bleeding had slowed, but every breath burned. The fire had gone out on its own, choked by dust and stone. Daniel, the rancher, sat near the body of the sheriff. The man lay face up, still. One eye half open, the other closed. Ash coated the ground. Among the burned crates and broken boards, something caught Daniel's eye. A corner of scorched leather. The pouch. It hadn't burned completely. Daniel reached for it. His fingers shook, but he opened the flap. Inside was the half-burned photo, what was left of it. The edges were black, but one face was still clear. The man on the left wore a work shirt and narrow hat. Square jaw, narrow eyes. Daniel stared hard. That face, he had seen it before. In a box back home. In a picture above the fireplace when he was a boy, his grandfather. Daniel, the rancher, blinked. Breath caught. His grandfather had stood in this shaft. With this gold. With TH, and one of the men had died for it. Daniel turned to the sheriff's body. He searched the coat pockets. One envelope, yellowed, folded tight, sealed with wax, cracked and faded. Daniel opened it slow. A letter, handwritten. To whoever finds this, know the truth. We hid the gold after the war, said it belonged to ghosts, said the land was cursed. We lied. There were 3 of us. 2 survived. The third never made it out of the shaft. We carved the chapel, built it to cover the door. If someone finds this, let the land speak truth. Signed at the bottom, T.H. Sheriff W. Cutter Daniel, the rancher, held the letter tight. Proof token number 3. Wind slipped through the broken shaft. The air shifted. Smoke moved, and there, beside the old rail, something glowed faint orange in the dust. The map, the one that had burned days before, now it lay untouched, not a mark on it. Daniel stepped closer, picked it up. It was whole again. The red X clear. Trinity Shaft. Daniel looked at the body, then at the map, then at the photo in his hand. Blood on the floor. Blood on the truth. The truth had waited 50 years. The days passed slow after the shootout. Daniel Coyle spent 3 nights in the barn, bleeding and feverish. When the pain eased enough to move, Daniel rode into town. Daniel, the rancher, didn't ask for help. He paid for it. A lawyer filed the claim. A banker handled the rest. The government took its share, but Daniel kept enough, not to be rich, just to rebuild. 2 months later, the ranch looked different. Fence lines were clean. The barn had a new roof. A well stood near the stable, capped in stone and steel. The chapel, once buried in trees, was cleared. Ivy cut, walls patched. A small iron cross stood again on the roof. Daniel, the rancher, hired men from nearby towns. He paid fair, said little. He built a wooden box with his own hands, nothing fancy, just solid. Inside, he placed 3 things: the burned photo, the leather pouch marked T.H., the letter signed by his grandfather and sheriff, Cutter.proof tokens, 3 of them. Daniel locked the box and slid it beneath the chapel altar. The map, he kept that in his coat pocket. On the fourth Sunday, Daniel painted a sign. White letters across dark cedar. He hung it on the front gate. Coyle Ranch. Truth. Runs deep. Some folks stopped by, travelers, journalists. One man asked if the stories were true. Daniel looked him in the eye and said, "Parts of them." Daniel, the rancher, never told everything, but the chapel was always open. And the land. The land felt quiet now, not empty, just quiet. Some land hides secrets. This one speaks. The wind came back slowly. It moved across the hills like it remembered something. It slipped between the fence posts across the rebuilt barn, through the open door of the chapel. Daniel Coyle stood at the edge of the pasture. The sky above was wide. Clouds moved slow. Daniel, the rancher, was older now. His hands were lined and firm. His coat still carried dust, and the map, folded neat, still sat in the left chest pocket. Children laughed behind him. A small school group had come to tour the land. Their teacher spoke in soft, careful words, pointing to old timbers and marks on the chapel wall. A boy, maybe 9, wandered away from the group. The boy walked up beside Daniel and stared at the chapel door. "Is it haunted?" Daniel looked down. At him, he reached into his pocket. Not for the map, but for something older. The gold coin, worn smooth. The same one from the pouch marked T.H. Daniel held it out to the boy. "No," Daniel said. "Only by greed." The boy turned it in his hand. The weight made him quiet. Inside the chapel, a single candle flickered on the altar. Beneath it sat the wooden box. Inside the box, the pouch, the photo, and the letter. Proof tokens, all of them. Daniel stepped into the chapel. The children stayed. Outside, he stood before the altar alone. The flame danced in the draught. Outside, the wind picked up again. This time, it carried something soft, a whistle. But Daniel didn't flinch. The sound wasn't cruel anymore. It felt like a name being spoken. "Gently, Daniel, Daniel, Daniel. Would you have taken the land, then let the land speak?"